Your Holiness, it's an honor of my life to meet you today, Taši Delek, or how we say in Czech, Dobrý den. You lived through so many hard challenges during your life, so my first question would be, what's the message and maybe the lesson that you learned during your lifetime? What would you say to the young generation? What would be your message?
Firstly, from childhood, you see, we learn the importance of compassion. Many years, several decades, I learned, and at a young age, these things are just knowledge. Then eventually, my life become more difficult. Then these teaching really very, very helpful. Firstly, you see, entire sentient being and at practical level, entire humanity on this planet we call mother sentient being. So you have the close feeling and sense of concern of entire humanity. Those human brothers, sisters who create a problem for you, still they are human brothers, sisters. Whether we like it or not, we have to live together, side by side. Now, in our case, like Chinese communists, you see, we suffer a lot, but still we have to live side by side. And they also basically human being, human brothers, sisters, and human good quality they also have. Their very idea of socialism very much based on oneness of entire human being and particularly working class people. So now, sometimes you see these people too much emphasis on ideology and lost the very principle of democracy or socialism. So now things are changing. So I feel the concept oneness of 7 billion human beings at the practical level, we have to live together on this planet.
Mm-hmm. But you talked about ideology. We live in times of increasing division. So how to be personally better in facing division, in bringing people together, how to be better in it?
In the past, we too much sort of emphasis my nation, my people. Now that thinking is gone. Now we should think entire 7 billion human being, just one human community. So now, as an entire human being on this planet, everyone wants peace, happy. No one wants quarrel, killing. So if someone at the time of birth with a weapon, then there's an exception. No one dead. You see, every human being from birth, they immediately taking mother's milk and feel safe when mother carry. That's basic human nature. Now, materialistic thinking, not much thinking about these deeper human value, And on top of that, you see too much emphasis my nation or my community. At the time of birth, nobody thinking my nation like that. Eventually, you see, we, through education, we forget, we neglected about basic human value. But rather, you see, your nation, your religion, these things, more emphasis in education field. So I have the sort of opinion. Now, education system should include about basic human value as a secular way, not as a religious thing. So,
Yes.
Existing education system also only talk about material value, external thing, not talking about inner peace of mind. So these days, I'm talking the hygiene of physical important. That in modern education there. Now, more important, hygiene of emotion. That's very important. Now, Indian tradition, there are a lot of talks about our emotion, how to keep peace of mind. The India's 1,000-year-old tradition, the non-violence and compassion. So, over 3,000 years, this country, you see, already have the idea important to keep peace, in order to keep peace of mind, the karuna, compassion. And with that, our action, non-violence. So that I consider human good quality, not necessarily religious matter. So we can, I myself, you see, totally dedicated, promote peace of mind. I never try to propagate Buddhism or religious matter as a human being. Then different people who have different, or say the religion, then of course, for Buddhist, I'm Buddhist, it is my responsibility to explain. But one, my commitment is religious harmony. So in spite differences in philosophy or concept, some say there's God, some say no God, some say life after life, some say only this life. That's personal matter. But all major religious traditions carry many messages, as I mentioned earlier, loving kindness. For Christian believer, we created by God. So we are, in a way, children of God. God is infinite love. So we all children of that kind of Father. So if you accept Jesus Christ as His creation, then there is no ground to fight each other. Same Father. We all are children of that kind of Father. So that also very powerful. So in any way, I totally sort of dedicated to promote religious harmony. Then non-believer, as I mentioned earlier, human nature is a social animal. naturally, from birth, we have the sense of concern of your own brothers, sisters. So now, something we should pay more attention is in education, modern education field. We should include education about mind, about emotion, and how to keep peace of mind.
Sure. Do you think the world would be a better place if all the politicians would know how to meditate? Would you teach them all? The world would be a better place.
Frankly speaking, old politicians are difficult to change their mind. Yes. The hope is younger generation, through education, through school, we should sort of teach how to keep peace of mind. And on that basis, you say, the concept of oneness of 7 billion human beings through education. Then these young people gradually, you see, leaders, including politicians, then there is real hope.
You met with hundreds of leaders. What were the qualities that were shared by those you admired?
Of course, in the past, like President Havla, now that's past. Now, existing, still alive, the leader, Obama, you see, he totally agree about my thinking. So we become a very close, trusted friend. And one occasion, my meeting with him, we have some discussion. Then I told him, you are younger than me. So after me, you should think, you should carry about our sort of view, how to develop peace of the world and through inner peace. He promised like that. So he, and since we very close friend, one day when I met, I asked him, can we hold your ear? And he said, yes, yes. Then I hold his 2 ears and then head, bang, bang, like that.
What did he say? Was he surprised?
He very happy like that. So as I mentioned earlier, then at the last I asked him, please carry our sort of idea after me. Please carry these. He promised like that. So he, one wonderful sort of leader like that.
Yes. You yourself are a leader. How was it for you personally? How did you handle all the responsibility that came with being a leader? Spiritual used to be political. How hard was it for you?
My background, as you know, spiritual. So 2011, I retired from political responsibility. And we already have elected political leadership. They carry this political matter. But for Tibetan people, I'm, of course, spiritual leader, or Tibetan trusted me. So morally, I'm leader. So here, regarding Tibet, the 1,000-year-old Tibetan tradition mainly come from India, the 8th century. The Nalanda master Shantarakshita, he invited by Tibetan emperor at that time, 8th century. Then firstly, the 7th century, Tibetan first king, he married with Chinese princess, very close link. I think Buddhism introduced by Chinese Buddhists. But then sometimes I half joke, you see, he certainly loves Chinese food, but he don't like Chinese letter, too complicated. So then he decided we should develop our own script, copy from Indian Devanagari, alphabet, kakakanga, chachasanya, like that. So since then, 8th century, the Nalendra master, when he reached Tibet, he told Tibetan emperor, now since you have your own language, so now instead of study Pali or Sanskrit, you should translate these texts into Tibetan, your own Tibetan language. So now we have, since then, translation started. So now altogether about 300 volumes in Tibetan language, translated from many books in Sanskrit and number of books Pali language, like that. So now here, now I found the best language to explain about logic, Buddhist logic, and Buddhist philosophy and psychology. I found Tibetan language is the best language.
Okay. I should learn it, probably. Yes.
Yes.
Is it hard? Tibetan hard, right?
I'm very happy. You see, you as a young scholar. So if you pay more attention for learning Tibetan language, and it now 100% show the Buddhist logic, the best language is Tibetan language.
Okay.
In Chinese Buddhist language, not much mention about logic. So in Tibetan language, all those great Indian master, logician, great master, they are writing most part translated into Tibetan. So now today, Tibetan who study these, their sort of mind more, sophisticated, like that. And then also in Tibetan language, what called dialectic. Tibetan language in dialectic is something very familiar. Through that way, so now the Nalanda tradition always emphasizes investigation. In order to investigation, the dialectical language is very essential, very important. So sometimes, sometimes I jokingly, you see, telling some my friend, the Buddhist monk from Pali tradition, I jokingly telling them, your tradition is foundation of Buddha Dharma. Oh, wonderful, but you have no teeth. If some difficult subject come, then you said you should, there's no way to choose. Just like that. So since we study logical approach, so no matter how difficult subject, we can bite, like that. So therefore, today I found as far as dialectical way to explain Buddhist philosophy, Tibetan language is the best language, I noticed, like that. So we, as a refugee, we lost our own country. Quite a big number Tibetan in India as a refugee. Now we consider importance of re-establish those ancient Tibetan big monastery. You see, they usually have, in order to become scholar in Tibet, at least 20, 30 years study. So that tradition we re-establish in India. So we have about, I think, about 10,000 monk students. Now they still carry this tradition, logical approach. The Nalanda tradition, even using Buddha's own word, we raise question, why Buddha says that? Investigate. So if through investigation, Buddha's own word, if you find some contradiction, we have the right to reject. That's Nalanda tradition. Many Nalanda master, you see, even some Buddha's word, they reject. So that's, I think, wonderful. So always emphasis logical approach through reasoning, like that.
Let me pivot a little bit, because topic of our conference is European Union. So I would like to ask you if after many decades that it exists, do you still see what is the reason for existence of European Union, and why is it important nowadays?
I always say, admire the spirit of European Union. They, like French, German, in past many occasions fighting, killing each other. Then that very two nations, after Second World War, Adenauer, Germany, de Gaulle, French, now they develop the spirit of European Union. Since they established European Union, mainly, you see, carried by French and Germany, previously arch enemy. So, spirit of European Union, I really admire. So, now, because European Union developed, since then, no longer any killing among the members of European Union. Now, the spirit of European Union and should spread to Africa, Latin America, and Arab countries, some kind of union. That's the best way guarantee for peace. So I always express that I really admire the spirit of European Union. If European Union not develop, then last few decades, some killing among the members of European Union. now completely peace. So now that spirit eventually should develop entire world, some kind of union. Then we can really develop no longer military forces, truly peaceful world. So I'm hoping now younger generation, their thinking is more open. I think including you, thinking more open. The older people, a little bit stubborn.
We have some of them here, so just they, you know.
So the reality must change. So old thinking, too much emphasis my nation or my community is outdated. Now, according to reality, we should think about humanity on the basis of oneness of 7 billion human beings. So, I think younger generation, now they can think according new reality. Old people, sometimes it's difficult to accept a new reality. They're still thinking old thinking like that. Now, like United Nations and the European Union, I think can make some contribution regarding the concept of oneness of 7 billion human beings and work together.
But these topics like humanity and oneness of all or climate change are sometimes overshadowed by topics like money and economics. Many politicians seem to care more about money than anything else. My question is, how we can effectively beat money by topics like humanity or climate change? Is there any way?
Now, as I mentioned earlier, hygiene of physical, the material life, mainly concerned about hygiene of physical. Now that's not sufficient. Now we have this emotion. So we should pay more attention about the hygiene of emotion. For that, not through prayer, not through religious belief, but through education and mainly a scientific sort of explanation, how to keep peace of mind. That. So I think future generation, I'm hopeful. You see, new way of thinking. Then on top of that, one problem, global warming. Or some experts say now within few decades, the global warming reach such a sort of level, the most river will dry. So very serious matter. And Tibet, an Asian continent, the source of water, most rivers which cover China, Vietnam, and these Indonesian, and then India, these big river, now within my own lifetime in Tibet, these level of these river reducing. So now, next few decades, it is quite serious. So eventually Tibet will be some kind of desert land. Then many, I think over 1 billion human population, their life depends those rivers which come from Tibet, then become very difficult. So now we have to think, we have to accept our whole world. Now eventually towards the ending of this planet.
Mm-hmm.
So while we alive, much better live together with spirit of brotherhood, sisterhood. So now no longer thinking too much emphasis we and they, and spend a lot of money for weapon. That's now short-sighted, like that.
Your Holiness, since coming into exile, millions of people, both young and old, have listened to your words. It helped them, and they benefited from your teachings. So my question is, will there be a next Dalai Lama? And if not, who will continue in your work?
Dalai Lama institution since some time back, this institution, developed, and then I think fifth Dalai Lama, then this institution is a political power as well as spiritual leader. Now political power, as I mentioned earlier, I already sort of retired. So now it is it is not right. The rich tradition like Buddhism, Nalanda tradition, Buddhism, depend on one individual person is wrong. Now institution, as I mentioned earlier, in India, we already have big monastic institution. They carry this knowledge. In Tibet also, number of monastery in some remote area. In Lhasa area, not much, too much sort of control and restriction. But some remote area, thousands Tibetan still study, practice. So Tibetan spirit, based on this Nalanda tradition, very strong. So Tibetan people, really, I think Buddhist faith, Buddhist spirit, much stronger than communism. When I met Chairman Mao Zedong, one occasion, he mentioned to me, your mind, very scientific mind. So religion is opium. Chairman Mao Zedong told me like that. But now, time passes, now number of Chinese communists, their mind, much closer to Buddhism than Marxism. So now time passes, I think in Tibet and also in China and Mongolia, I think Buddhism will grow. Buddhist faith will grow. The communist ideology I think communist ideology, very good. When I was in China, I was in Peking, I want to join Communist Party. I love the socialism and working class people, special sort of effort for right of working class people. Wonderful. So now, China, as I briefly mentioned, number of Chinese, including many Chinese communists, in deep inside Buddhist faith. Now things are changing. Buddhism in general, particularly Nalanda tradition, is a very scientific religion. So next, I think, 1 century, I think new thinking definitely come. And then communism, totalitarian system, no future. The Tibetan Buddhist tradition, great future.
Let's hope for that. Your Holiness, it's been a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you very much.
Thank you.